The truth behind the Nazis. Our essential question was, to what extent were the Nazis influenced by Hitler and their environment as they played their roles of cruel, dehumanizing guards? Were the Nazis' ideologies impacted more by their surrounding environment and the way they were raised, or were they born evil? Hitler and wealth. Hitler was born into an average middle-class family and had enough to keep him happy. He did not have any problems with money until he failed in the arts later in his life. The original Nazis. The Nazi Party was initially formed from a well-meant group called the German Workers' Social Party that advocated against communism. Hitler was born into a normal family, but as he grew, he became more influenced by the places he lived and the events that happened around him. When Hitler attempted art in Vienna, he was exposed to their overly anti-Semitic population. He became influenced by their anti-Semitism and soon made it his own belief. During World War I, Hitler was injured and sent back to Berlin. While in Berlin, Hitler's hatred for Jews grew even more because many Jews were instigating peace protests. Hitler, along with many other Germans, blamed the Jews for undermining Germany's war efforts. The Treaty of Versailles after the war furthered their anti-Semitism as the treaty forced Germans into worse conditions, causing them to pin more blame on the Jews. Later, when Hitler was chancellor, he was able to influence those around him to do atrocious acts, even if those people were good. This was because of their environment. Thus, Hitler was constantly influenced to be the way he was, even if he was inwardly good. And although he was born into a good family and initially taught good values, he eventually submitted to the ideas of those around him and became deeply invested in these ideas. The Nazis themselves were normal, good-natured people, but were twisted by Hitler's influence.
How do Milgram's findings from his shock experiment relate to the actions and behaviors of the Nazis during the Holocaust? Milgram conducted the shock experiment in 1963 after analyzing the Nazi war crime Nuremberg trials. With this experiment, Milgram wanted to figure out the true extent authority figures have over one's decision-making and how one's moral compass also comes into play during tough decisions. 40 males ages 20 to 50 years old were brought into a Yale laboratory believing they were going to partake in an experiment about learning. All of the participants were assigned to be teachers that would help a learner memorize a list of words. The participants would ask a question about the words, and the learner would have to correctly answer. If the learner was wrong, the teacher would administer a shock that would increase in voltage with every incorrect answer. However, there is a catch with the experiment. The learner was a Confederate placed by Milgram that would purposely answer the questions incorrectly. The shocks administered in the experiment were also fake, and every time the learner was shocked, they were only acting as if they were actually in pain. Adolf Eichmann was one of many Nazi officials tried after World War II. Like his colleagues, Eichmann claimed he was simply following orders from those ranked above him and was not to blame for the deaths of millions of Jews. He also took no personal blame for his actions and instead placed the guilt and responsibility on the people he worked with. Obedience is a powerful force that can drive even the most ordinary people to do terrible things. In the heat of the moment, one can be prodded to make a decision that completely contradicts their moral compass. Whether it be that their decision is essential to continue an experiment or that their decision will alter the path Germany takes in World War II, anyone can have their decisions influenced by someone they see as more powerful than them. Foot in the door phenomenon is a technique that tries to get someone to agree with a large request by having them agree to smaller requests that gradually grow bigger. Hitler initially began with having the SS endorse his anti-Semitic laws and over the years escalated his demands until a mass murder was taking place. Conformity is the act of matching behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs to group norms. When the Nazi regime was coming into power, many of those in the Nazi Party did not believe in all of Hitler's anti-Semitic ideologies. However, many members wanted to gain power within the party, and they felt the right way to do so was to mirror Hitler's beliefs and actions. The desire to conform resulted in Hitler gaining numbers and support and therefore more power. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort one feels when their thoughts and behaviors contradict each other. Many Nazi officials experienced this because they did deep down believe that what they were doing was wrong. However, the only way to solve this problem is to change either one's behaviors or thoughts to match the other. In the case of the Nazis, many ended up changing their perspectives on their actions and justified their evil behavior, allowing them to carry out the mass murder of the Jews.
How do the findings of the Stanford Prison Experiment relate to the actions of the Nazis? The Stanford Prison Experiment took place in 1971, where psychologist Philip Zimbardo put 24 male college students in a simulated prison. They were divided into either playing the role of a prisoner or guard. Left without being told anything except to act accordingly to their roles, the guards were handed their uniforms, clubs, handcuffs, and more. The prisoners were handed inferiority, which meant they were only to be referred to by their numbers, or just wearing a shirt and had a chain on their foot. At first, the guards found their positions of power uncomfortable, but soon felt like this role was real, and they were with dangerous prisoners. The prisoners challenged the guards, and the guards acted with cruel and harsh punishments, such as stripping people naked, having them clean toilets with their bare hands, and some were locked into closets for hours where they had no way to sit. Guards turned to sexual humiliation, which resulted in mental breakdowns. They knew the prisoners hadn't actually done anything to earn mistreatment, and still the brutality became worse every hour. But the guards couldn't believe what they were doing was in any way harmful, and had lost all memory of the fact that this wasn't real. The experiment was then cut off short. How could ordinary people become so malicious? Well, now we can instigate why the Holocaust in Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, had taken place because of the power of the situation in this experiment. Given time, we could have gone there. Torture. David Elshman, participant in the study. At some level, we understood that something was happening that we were no longer in control of. It was damaging people. We were caught up in the events that were taking place. Dr. Craig Haney, social psychologist. Due to the persuasion Hitler had on the people, as explained before, the Nazi Party rose. Once these people joined such a group, they affiliated themselves with the role of a Nazi, a superior being. For them, their horrible acts were just another day at work, and they became de-individuated. De-individuation is a process in which a person loses his or her sense of individuality and responsibility as a result of being in a group. In simpler words, they lose awareness of their true selves. Prisoners were put into an environment in a role of inferiority, much of the reason they didn't rebel, and the Nazis acted as greater. At first, both Nazis and prisoners still had their individuality, but like in the prison experiment, it didn't take long for their true selves to become thrown away by the roles of the group. Ordinary people can do things that you would have never thought they could have done before, just by the power of the situation. This is why the Nazis committed such atrocities without a second thought. The environment transforms.
In conclusion, the Stanford Experiment, Milgram Shock Experiment, and Nature versus Nurture all corroborate with one another to prove that the Nazis were vastly impacted by their environment and upbringing, as well as by the roles forced on them by Hitler.